Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Millennial Business Podcast. I'm so excited to be joined today by the beautiful Sarah Davidson, Sarah, I didn't mention this before we started recording, but the way that I discovered you was actually a few years ago. I went to a business event and you were speaking and shared your story. I started following you on Instagram and have sort of maybe been Insta stalking you ever since. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. What event was it?
It was in Sydney. It was something to do with wellness. I can't actually remember what it was called. It was like
The Wellness Festival?
Yes, that's what it was.
That was such a fun event.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It was so good. Yeah, I loved it. And look, here we are now.
And Paul has come to join. He doesn't want to look at you because, Instagram face. He hasn't got his face on this morning, but
For the podcast listeners, Sarah has a very cute golden retriever lying on her bed behind her. So cool. So Sarah, when you were a lawyer, did you ever consider starting your own business? Or was this just like when you wanted to start your side hustle, was it like, yes, I've always wanted to start a business? Or was it like, oh, this is a random thing that sounds fun, let's try it out?
A bit of both, more the latter though. It was definitely something I had started going to League of Extraordinary Women events and Business Chicks events at uni. So even before I'd gotten into the workforce, I was aware that entrepreneurship was something that interested me and that maybe one day I would be able to do. But I sort of always had heard stories of people who had a really clear idea of what they wanted to do, or that it was something that made sense for them to go on and do. Whereas I was like, I don't really have any clear, unique skill set. I just am like good at a few different things. And there's no obvious like, oh, I'm great at baking, I should sell those things.
Yeah.
So it was in the back of my mind that maybe one day in the future I might start my own thing. But I really honestly thought it would be after I'd been 10, 20 years in the workforce. So when it did happen, I didn't think that was the one. I didn't think this is the idea that's going to be my way out. I thought this is my random side hustle that I'm going to do for fun because I want matcha and I've already spent a lot of money on it and I need to sell some. And it turned out to be the thing that made the transition happen a lot earlier than I ever thought. But I do think there's a beauty in not expecting that it's going to be your one and not putting a lot of pressure on that being your big move, because then you allow it to happen and you're not paralyzed by worry about making it the best that you can be. You just make decisions based on what you think is the best at that time. There's a lot less obligation and expectation on yourself when you're like, it's just for fun. And I think that's the reason a lot of big businesses now started in that really casual way, because if you tried to start the business it turned out to be, you never would have started.
Yeah, exactly. Because it can be so overwhelming trying to think of all of the things that you need to do. And I can't imagine that when you first started with your first 10 kilos that you were just selling to your family and friends, you would have ever thought about getting into Urban Outfitters in America, or like having your own pop-up shop, or having an online store that you sell to thousands of people all around the world. Like that's probably something your brain couldn't even come up with that idea or couldn't even comprehend. But through the process of getting there, and they were like the progressive next steps going on to the next bigger and better sort of things.
Absolutely. I always say you don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step. But I think like another extension of that is if you saw the whole staircase, you might never take the first step because you'd be like, holy shit, the staircase is too big. And I'm almost like I just finished writing the Seize the Yay book, and one of the big sort of lessons that I realized as I was writing it that I had learned in hindsight was that it's so important to dream big, to dream beyond your current situation, to dream beyond your doubts, and to dream in a way that's like, one day I could be the next blah. Like that's important in an ideation way, an inspiration way, but you have to plan small. You have to plan the nuts and bolts that are based on what's the immediate next step that you can take to get something done. Because until you've got your domain name, your ABN, like until you've got the really boring small things, you can't do the big thing anyway. So I think if you kind of bring your brain and your thinking back down to the small, it makes it achievable. It breaks it down into steps. The big vision out there is only going to scare you off in the beginning. So you have it out there in your mind, but it doesn't sit here. Here is just action, 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 because otherwise you get totally paralyzed.
Yeah, totally. And that's actually something that I coach some people on the side. I have a digital marketing agency, but I also coach some people in this sort of personal development realm because I'm so passionate about it. And one process that I take them through is creating a 10-year vision. And we start with the 10th year first because it opens up your mind to the possibilities of all of the amazing things that you could want to achieve, or like, people have never really been given the possibility to dream that big. That's not something that they give you the opportunity to do in school. So we start with the 10th year first, and then you have to try and reverse engineer your way back down through the years. But we still always constantly focus on like the year ahead of us. What are the 6-month goals that I need to achieve that's going to get me to the things that I've put for this year? And then what are the weekly goals that are going to get me to the 6 months, to the first year, so always bring it back, reverse engineering it, and looking at what are the things that I need to do this week that are going to get me to the goals that I want to achieve in 6 months or a year's time. I think it's so important.
Yeah, I think your coaching clients would be getting some excellent advice from you. It's so true. Like Christina Carlson, who started Kiki K, one of the things she always says is you can't achieve anything if you don't give yourself permission to dream. And the question she always asks people is, what would you do if you couldn't fail? If there were literally no barriers, what's your big dream? But then what's your now list? What is the like now list? And I think that's that tension between the big and the small. That's the balance where you get your thinking either towards doing something or not doing something. So you have to kind of tweak what you allow your brain to think about at different times based on how you're feeling. And it's really hard. I mean, I don't get it right all the time, but as long as you're aware that that's what your brain is doing, you're more likely to be able to channel it the right way.
Yeah, totally. We've spoken a little bit about Matcha Maiden in the episode and sort of everything that you've been doing with that business, but I would love for you to speak into a little bit more about Seize the Yay, because this is something that I can tell you're very passionate about, and I feel like my listeners will also gain a lot more from hearing a little bit about this. So what are you doing with Seize the Yay?
Yeah, again, it started as one of those things that was just on the side of the matcha businesses. It's almost like you step out of your comfort zone once, you kind of pat yourself on the back, and I really thought, this is it. Like, I'm never going to have to do anything ever again. I'll just be a matcha maiden forever. But, you know, your comfort zone, it catches up to you. And about 5 years in, I was like, okay, now what? Like, it's amazing. It's been an incredible journey. And of course I hadn't won business. I definitely hadn't learned everything I needed to learn, but the business was going in a direction that it had outgrown me. Like, my skills were no longer serving it the best. And I was also not getting out of it what I need for fulfillment in my day-to-day job. Not completely, but just enough to sort of think, well, maybe now that I've made my side hustle my full-time thing, maybe I need a side hustle as well. And so it was again like a case of like looking at the gaps. What are the things I'm really lacking? What are the things I want to talk about or communicate that I can't? And then once I realized what those things were, it was like, what's the best way to package them? And I realized on my personal account, which had started to sort of just grow by nature of running the business and by showing more of the behind the scenes, the anxiety, the shit days, and allowing that balance between what was on the business account versus what was going on behind the scenes, I realized that was more popular. That content of people going, oh my God, thank God that you're human, and thank God you have bad struggle days and motivation lacking days. And I thought, I have so many conversations about that stuff with other business owners and other people, more than I do about the, oh, how great did that thing go? Where can they live? Where can those kind of conversations live? Because they're the ones that when you hear that other people are going through it, you can push through it because you're like, I'm not alone. Oh my God. It's something that if you feel isolated, it overwhelms you. But if you feel like it's normal, you will push through it.
Yeah.
So then I sort of thought, well, what can I do with the skills that I have that I can do again, like on the side, that has no particular deadline? It's not like starting a big YouTube channel that has like, I need, you know, if I'm going to need camera people and blah, 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 like it's too much. I needed to dream big, but I wanted to have this all-encompassing brand, but I started small. So I thought if conversations is the thing that I want to do, a podcast is probably the best place for them to live, because on Instagram, people's attention span is a bit shorter. Not even a clue what a podcast, where they lived, what they were. Like, I barely even listened to them back then, but I just thought I think that's the right place. So I Googled like, where do you get your equipment? And then how do you use it? And I still remember the first day I was like, I have actually no flipping idea what I'm doing. I'm like setting up the mics and not even like doing them together. And poor Rachel Finch, who was my first guest, was like, are you okay? Do you need help with this? But again, it was a process of, okay, well, if I buy the equipment and I commit, then I'm going to have to figure out, reverse engineer how to use it. So I'll commit to buy, rip the Band-Aid, I'll figure it out backwards. I'll organize a guest so I'm locked in and give myself a deadline. And that all happened in the process of like maybe 3 weeks of figuring it out. And I just went for it. I was like, no obligation. There's no monetary pressure. There's no like, if I stuff it up, it's just me. And the biggest risk is that I look a little bit stupid, but the biggest gain is that it could possibly be the most fulfilling thing I've done in a long time. Mm. And we're 97 episodes in now, which is like, I just still can't even believe that it went so well. And I think because podcasting is such a liberal, it's a really liberated platform because there's no likes, followers, subscribers. You don't get any data. I mean, and no one else gets your data, but even you hardly get any. I just have conversations that I think are really interesting and important and show that finding your yay is not linear. It happens at all different ages and all different industries. It happens by people leaving jobs, going from business back into jobs, doing things as hobbies, doing things as full-time jobs. Like there's so many different structures. And over the course of, I think it's been about 1.5 years now, those conversations started to also get traction. And then I thought, one of the things that I really want to do is for people to have yay in their environment. Because I believe, you can't live a positive life with a negative mind or a negative environment. So then the next thing was like, in between podcasts, maybe you guys want quotes. So I'll make like a little flip book of quotes that sits on your desk. And then I thought, I don't know how to make a book. I just figured that out too. I was like, I'll just buy the design program and just figure out how to do it. And then at the end of last year, that turned into a proper book deal and now CCA is a book. So it's, again, one of those things that started out as a maybe something will come of it. And it's ended up bigger than I ever expected. But I think because I didn't have a plan and I didn't have expectations, I've allowed it to just go wherever it wants. And it's still, I don't know what it's going to end up like after that. But I think our life unravels in chapters, and there was an amazing matcha chapter, and this is kind of the cusp of the next one.
Yeah, amazing. I absolutely love that. And it seems to be a theme within everything that you do, that you sort of just have this 100% confidence to back yourself. You don't really know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to go on, like if it's going to work, if it's not going to work, but you just sort of jump in head first anyway and just see how it goes. Like, see if it works. Like, I love that, because a lot of people struggle so much with confidence, thinking, oh my God, what if I fail? What if I do look stupid? Like you said, well, the worst thing that could happen would be I'll look a little bit stupid. But so many people let that fear of looking stupid, or the fear of what their parents might say, or the fear of, they just don't have enough confidence within themselves. They let that hold them back. Is there anything that you do particularly to help you feel more confident, or is this something you've always had?
No, absolutely not. I've always been quite a confident person since I was a child in terms of performing. Like I was a ballerina. So in terms of being on a stage and in particular forums, I was very confident, but they were forums that I was familiar with. They were forums where I was really comfortable. So in terms of putting myself out there as a beginner or as a total novice, that was definitely not something I was familiar with, because I went into a job that I'd studied for 7 years to do. Yeah. Like I was never out of my depth. There was always some kind of training behind me. And there was so much unlearning when I went from an industry where you're literally paid to identify risks and avoid them, to an industry where the appetite for risk is what makes you successful. And a big part of that has been my husband. He's always had his own businesses. And so his appetite for risk and his resilience for looking silly and putting himself out there, it comes a lot more naturally to him. So being around someone who's like, hey, what's the worst that's going to happen, honestly? Yeah. That kind of dialogue really reminds you and hammers it in that you're like, really, I think we talk about fear of failure, which is of course scary, but I think the failure, if people knew that the failure wouldn't be public, I don't think they'd be scared of failure.
Yeah.
I think it's more fear of looking like you failed. It's fear of judgment and fear of looking silly that we're way more scared of. If people knew they could fail and no one would ever find out, they wouldn't care about the financial failure. They'd be like, whatever. It's more that people will maybe see that they put themselves out there. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is, firstly, if you can get comfortable with looking stupid, you will be able to do anything. You'll become invincible, because then you're free. You've actually liberated yourself from people's expectations. The best way to do that is often to make yourself look silly and preempt it, because then you force yourself to be comfortable with it, which is why I really pushed myself in the early days to share stuff I wasn't comfortable with so that I would become comfortable with it and be like, well, you've seen my freaking 7 chins. So now I'm not going to care if I accidentally have 2 chins. Like, that's a bonus. You just take control of the way people perceive you. But the other thing is, self-doubt never goes away. The biggest thing I've learned from doing these CSVA interviews is that the most successful, the least successful, the most famous, the least famous, no one outlives self-doubt except people who are complacent and who stop caring whether they're doing a good job or not. Most people, if they're invested in what they do, it's a sign that you care. In fact, you never want it to go away, because then you think, well, now I'm not questioning whether I'm doing a good job or not. I'm just too comfortable. The difference is that they learn to push through it rather than to let it dictate your decisions. So I kind of think it's going to happen anyway. It's almost like a reflex to anything new or uncomfortable. The big thing is, instead of going, oh, maybe that doubt is right, maybe I shouldn't do it, is just going, I see you. I know what you're doing. It's self-protection. You're protecting me, but actually you're wrong. You're almost always wrong. It's just a reflex. I'm just going to do it anyway and prove you wrong. And the main way to prove to yourself what you can do is doing it and just trying. If everything is hypothetical, you're never actually going to know. And you'd rather an idea not work because the market wasn't right or because your product wasn't right. At least then you won't die wondering. You'll be like, I tried. Most of the time it will actually work. If it doesn't, you'll fix it and you'll do it another way. Like, I think the big thing is just starting and remembering that self-doubt isn't your enemy. It's just something that proves you care, reminds you you're human, and then you push through it. And that's really, really helped me, because before I would have seen it as a sign to not do it. I'd be like, all these doubts mean not a good idea. Whereas now I'm like, that probably means it's the best idea, because it means it's the scariest, which means it's the most unfamiliar, which means it's the best growth.
Yeah, I love that. I think it comes back down to, I guess, self-awareness as well, like being able to recognize, okay, that's a voice, that's a thought that's coming up for me that's not helpful, or it's a thought that's coming up that's going to help me grow or progress or become a better version of myself, because I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone. Some people don't necessarily have the ability to think, oh, that's a weird thought that's coming up in my head. Like, I remember the first day I ever thought that to myself, and I called my coach at the time. His name is Emil. And I was like, oh my God, Emil, I was just feeling super overwhelmed. And then I thought to myself, why am I feeling overwhelmed? What is this feeling? And where is it coming from? And then I was like, oh my God, how did I just do that? And he was like, oh, I'm so proud of you. So like, it's a thing that some people don't actually have, but constantly trying to maybe journal about it or remind yourself that these are things that you can pick up on if you choose to. It's super important, because once you can pick up on those things, you really start to take control of your mindset, and you can recognize, okay, well, that's a bad emotion, or that's an unhelpful emotion, and that is separate from me. That's not me, and that's not who I am. It's a separate thing that I can control if I want to. So I think that's super important for people to remember as well.
Absolutely. I think you are not your emotions, and too many people get them enmeshed all in one thing. But one of the main concepts in psychology, and I've done so much therapy and psychology, obviously, to get to this point in my life. How good are coaches and therapists? One of the biggest concepts in achieving self-awareness in a positive way is the idea of metacognition, which really just means the ability to think about your own thoughts. And all of us have that. It's not like a skill that some people are born with and they don't. It's just, you have to be aware of it, that it's a thing, and then exercise it. And I think most people don't realize that they can have a thought and then have a thought about the thought. They only think they're sitting here. But once you can kind of take a bird's eye view and think about your thoughts as an objective observer, and then go, oh, she's having a shit thought, remove that. Oh, that's a great thought. Let's do that. once you, I mean, it sounds a bit schizophrenic having all these voices in your head, but that's a multi-layered human does. Once you can exercise that metacognition and start to, and it's the same with anxiety. I actually learned it in the context of anxiety. Once you realize you are not your anxiety, you can observe it as an observer and go, you know what, this is going to pass. You feel it all consuming right now. It'll pass. Your logical brain can tell you, just wait it out. You'll be fine. You can cope with anything then because you can interpret it all the right way.
Sarah, if people want to find more about you online, about your matcha, or about Seize the Yay, where can they find you?
Everywhere. Spoonful of Sarah on Instagram, Seize the Yay on Instagram, Matcha Maiden, Matcha Milk Bar on Instagram. They all go to me. So any one of those you can pick. My email, my website, all the links are available on all of those pages. There's about 1 million different ways you can get to me, and I try and keep track of all of them. And love questions, love comments, love feedback, love connecting with new people.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me on the show. I absolutely loved everything that we talked about, and it was super interesting to hear again about your story. I think we dove a little bit deeper, and it's great to hear where you've gone in the past couple of years and the journey that you've been on, because it sounds like it's been an amazing journey. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Until the next episode, guys, we'll see you later. Bye.